goes, nice.
Alright. So as we go through this foot massage, the idea, because she's had surgery and there's scar tissue on both sides here, medial and lateral, I just want to start by loosening up the foot. And that'll be my focus, is working on the sutures, or rather the scar tissue itself. As I just start with a little bit of traction. Traction is going to be the main theme, as once you've had a break, you have compression of bones. And one of the best things for that is to traction it or stretch it out. Initially, I start off with working around the malleoli, so working around the ankle bone. Sometimes there's some swelling, and I can tell by pushing and seeing how it kind of puffs up around it. It's not that swollen today, but there is some swelling. So that lymphatic drainage, that unidirectional stroke towards the heart, can really help to get rid of some of that retention fluid. Also lowering our salt, avoiding crossing our legs, avoiding tight socks, and getting some mobility work in the ankle can all help to get rid of the swelling as well. And I'll ask my guest to just flick her foot if I get too aggressive, or to vocalize so she can let me know. So I'm just running through the zones in between the metatarsals, in between the toe bones that connect to the ankle bones. And we're just doing drainage work on that initially. And it is quite puffy here. You can see when I push and that it kind of puffs up elsewhere. So sometimes when things get swollen here, the swelling will come down a little bit more. It looks like she has tight shoes on, and that's creating more of the swelling. I can tell that by, I don't know if you can see it in this light here, but there's a band where the shoe actually goes, and that's giving a little bit of pressure, and it's a little too tight. Maybe they're new shoes and need to be loosened up a bit. So we're just starting with joint play with the first metatarsal. I secure my right hand on the second metatarsal and move my fingers in between the metatarsals of the first and the second, and I'm pushing up and down to get some mobility in there. I'll hold the second with my left and go in between the second and third with my right, and continue that and make my way across. Next, I want to do dorsiflexion, an extension of the foot, to start mobilizing the joint that locks up. And so she doesn't have a lot of range of motion. This is about it. And we're just encouraging it to go a little further. So I kind of hold this position a little longer each time that I do it. I might draw the heel towards me as I push the ball away. Sometimes it's easier to get the strength by leaning into it with my palm into my sternum and drawing the heel towards myself. Then I'll rotate the ankle, keeping my hand on the ankle bones itself so I can feel if we have some crepitousness, some crunchiness of indication that there's bone on bone. And then I'll come back and do traction to allow synovial fluid to lubricate between the bones. And I can just open up the foot a little bit, do some toothpaste squeezes, essentially an effleurage to the foot. And we can work the heel on one side, and the other side. And then I'm going to start with a little bit of a pincer grasp, starting at the top of the Achilles tendons and working down 4 or 5 pincer grasps through that zone. The Achilles tendon connects the calf muscle to the heel, and it's also a reflex point for sciatica, lower back pain, and bowels. So everybody can benefit from this. Tends to be quite tender, so I don't squeeze it too firmly, but it is progressive pressure. So on my next round, I'm doing more pressure than the one before, unless she clenches her toes or signals that it's tender, in which case I would ease off the pressure and be mindful of her reactions. Coming across dorsiflexion, I just want to open up the actual ankle. So we'll feel that there's tendons that stick out as I flex the foot. My fingers are palpating for those tendons and kind of collapsing them a little bit. And I'm looking to find the ropiest of them. And once I find what's the ropiest, I'll stay there and hold that. And for her, it tends to be right here. So I'll just hold on. And I'm staying on the tendon with my fingers pushing down straight into the ropey tendon. And it's a little tender, so I'll ease off a bit. Sorry. Just got a little cue there. And I'm still staying on it. I've eased off the pressure, and I'm just slightly moving forward and back on it. After about a minute or two, I can start to go left to right. So initially we run the way the tendon runs to coax it to relax. And then try not to pop on and off it, stay on that ropey tendon and just let it kind of move from side to side now. And we'll go back to up and down. And it feels a lot softer. It's still quite tender for her, but for me, she just gave me an indication that, whoa, that's a bit much. But for me, it did sink and surrender some. A tendon is very taut. And so once I feel that it starts to soften, then I get more range of motion in the foot. You can see already, or I don't know if you can actually see it, but I can see it and feel it, that there's a lot more range of motion. So I'm able to point her toe a lot further, and I'm just going to hold that for a good minute so that the Golgi tendon organs that connect the tendon to the muscle have a reset. At about a minute to 2 minutes, they start to understand that this length is a comfortable length for them, and they're able to hold that instead of going into a protective mode. If I'm ever stretching and there's a shaking happening, I want to ease off of the stretch and micro movement because I've went too far. That would be your indication that the body is not relaxing into that. And so now that we've opened the tendon up that's restricting the range of motion in this part of the ankle, I can do a little bit of rotation, kind of distracting it, and then a little traction. I'm trying not to have my fingers hit her scars, so try and avoid that while you're doing traction because you are gripping quite firmly. And then dorsiflexion. Now dorsiflexion comes from the ankle, so I'm not going to get much range of motion on this because we really haven't worked on the Achilles very much yet. And dorsiflexion is where she has a restriction in her range of motion. So for the heel, I can do, I don't know, let's see how we can see this. So I could do scar tissue stripping, which is essentially where I'm moving a finger away from the other finger an inch or two. And generally you're doing this without oils, so if there are oils on, you can just wipe them off. And that'll get you a little bit more. So you might not be able to see my fingers moving under there. But after about an inch or two of tearing that fascia, I lose the traction. And so that's the end of the movement. And I just start again. So I might do 100 of these really. Or once it gets red or irritated and she's had enough, then I'll give it a break. And give it some love, warm it up. One thing that's really nice after you've picked on things is to do a little rocking motion where you're heating up the joint with your palm. So the heat will feel really nice and soothing, and mobility work that's not massive will allow them to relax into it. And then I can go back and see, all right, I've got a little bit more range with my dorsiflexion already. Right. And now we'll start to work on the scar tissue that's inhibiting some more range of motion. So initially we're starting by, I don't know if you could see this scar here, but I'm going to start on either side of it and just do a little tearing technique where I'm pulling away. It's fairly light, as scars tend to be tender, and they have either one of two things, where they don't feel it very much. There might be neuralgia, where there's nerve pain with it, or where the nerve has died. So if they don't feel it, you can go deep, but if they feel it, it's very sensitive, and so we go lighter. Second move I'm doing now is skin rolling. So I'm literally just picking up a little bit of the skin, pushing forward with my thumb and inching with my other fingers. Skin rolling is another wonderful technique for releasing adhesions. So those are our two techniques to release adhesions. The first one was scar tissue stripping. You could do it on the scar now, which she signaled that's a little tender, so I'll do it on either side of the scar instead and pull away from each other. A more aggressive is on the scar and going straight up. I did that one really light, I was sneaky. And then I'll inch my fingers forward and loosen up. And I could feel now this tissue has loosened. I can pick it up a lot easier as I do my skin rolling. Essentially, when you're doing skin rolling, your bottom finger is always pushing up and your top finger just wants to hold a little bit more than skin. So it's picking up on the fascia and stripping those adhesions down. So I'm going to do that on the other side now, which unfortunately you won't be able to see, but I'll walk you through it again. My thumbs are going on either side of the scar tissue and opening it up. And then I'm going to go inch with skin rolling through the tissue, through the scar. If it's a fresh scar, you do have to wait at least 6 weeks or up to 3 months before you do scar tissue stripping. Unless there's puckering, misalignment because the stitches were too tight or there was some kind of irritation, then you can go in, but just be ever so gentle, and really the skin and the underlying tissues need a little bit of time to heal. But if you see that realignment needs to happen, you can go in just really light. So after I've done my skin rolling, I'm doing a little bit of fascial stripping through the tendon lengthwise, right on the scar itself. And again, now I just want to soothe that area. When I friction my hands together, I ask for God's energy and any spirits or loved ones that they have to come through my hands and to offer a healing to them. As I place my hands on there, the warmth is like a mother's womb, or very nurturing cocoon. And so I'll just hold that for a moment as they breathe through it. It's almost like a little bit of a reminder that they're loved, and I know that this is unpleasant work, but this is like the soothing part of reminding them that they are loved and supported. And so here we go back into a little bit of ankle mobility work. I'm trying not to hit the scar itself, so I'm underneath using the palms, and my fingers are loose. And then I can take that same technique and do inversion, eversion, eversion, inversion, and go faster. And if somebody doesn't have the mobility, it's probably best to start with small motions and then make them bigger. And hold it a little bit before you do that mobility work so they know what to expect. And the foot goes a little bit more, gives a little bit more, there's less resistance. All right. Again, I'm coming into traction now. And I'm coming back. We always give things breaks that need a lot of work. So now I'm back to pincer grasping on the Achilles tendon. Remember, that connects the gastrocnemius to the calcaneus, the calf muscle, to the heel. And so this tendon is a really key player in relaxing the ankle. And something that's really important for them to do at home is dorsiflexion. If she was to take her foot against the wall and just have her toes up against the wall, that would encourage dorsiflexion. That would be, bless you, localized to the, I thought you had a sneeze coming, localized to the ankle or to the Achilles. So from there, I'm going to give this whole area a break now because it's had a little bit of work done to it. And we're going to come back and do that all again. But in between then, you can work on the rest of the foot now and see what other structures are involved. She's starting to have a little bit of hammer toes exaggerated, look like this. So when people have foot pain, they start to walk carefully because it hurts. and they might be having compensating structures. One of them to look out for is hammer toes. When that happens, you know that they're holding a lot of tension all the way to their toes, and they're clenching quite a lot. So if you're clenching, you can cause plantar fasciitis. Essentially you're doing it to relieve pressure when you're walking. It's a natural compensation, but it hurts a lot of other structures. So you want to discourage it, and you do want to work with hammer toes. So discouraging it would be having them be mindful that when they walk, you're going to use a tripod. So you land on your heels first, and then the two other points that land at the same time are under the ball of the foot, under the first toe, and under the fourth toe. That's where we should be feeling calluses. With this guest, I can feel that she has a callus underneath the second and third toe, which tells me that she's curling things in, and that's going to cause arthritis in the big joint as well as hammer toes, which is kind of like tendonitis in the tendons underneath. They become very, very ropey, and they just hold themselves in an engaged position all the time. So lengthening the toes first, let's start with that. Just going to hold the tendon right underneath the base of the toe where it meets the ball of the foot. I don't know if you could see that. There we go. And as I hold that, I'm collapsing the tendon that it connects to. And I might just pulsate in that area for a little bit. As I'm doing that, my other finger can lengthen the toe. And as I come into lengthening the toe, you're not going to get it straight, but you might notice that my middle finger just came onto the knuckle, her second flange, or her second joint there, the joint closest to the ball of the foot. And I'm holding it down and pushing the tip of her toe up. So I'm holding it in length. And this is how her toe normally should be, but it's one heck of a stretch. Again, my finger is still palpating at the base of the tendon as I'm holding length. After about half a minute or a minute, the body starts to relax into that length and stops resisting. I feel like I need less force to hold it up. Once you notice that, then start milking the toe and give it a little bit of traction and a little bit of twisting, and then always let it go straight. So you can see right away that toe is a lot longer. This is a thing that is incredible to work on at the beginning, but once hammer toes get really locked into place, there's not much that you can do. You can do the same technique, but it's not going to show so much length. So know that. At the beginning, it's easier to find the length and to correct things. Once it's been there for so long, it's still a good idea to stretch it out. They'll benefit from having synovial fluid, lubricate in between each of these bones. But the tendon becomes so incredibly taut that relaxing it is not likely a quick fix. So she only has it really defined in those two and in the tip of her fourth. So the fourth, it's not in the knuckle yet, it's just at the tip, so I can just lengthen the tip of it, and it would be the tendon right underneath the tip that I'm going to peg. And again, I'm just kind of oscillating up and down on it with a little bit of pressure. My eyes are constantly looking back up to make sure she's not signaling to me. I've asked her to signal with her hands or her feet, and she's using her hands. Tendons don't tend to be that tender, actually. They're very strong, and they can take a lot of pressure. Well, still good just to check in, make sure everybody's comfortable. So now the base of the ball of the foot, I'm just going to collapse the pressure in there essentially, because this is where it's engaging so much for these toes to hold the tendons down to. There's a lot of pressure in there. So we'll open that up. And because her foot is starting to curl in, and you could see that if you're not sure how to see that in anybody, as soon as your toes raise like this, your foot is curling in, right? So you need the opposite to happen. To widen the foot, be careful on the dorsal of the foot, on the top of the foot. It tends to be tender. As we age, it gets even more tender, and the nerves can become exposed. So try not to dig in with your top fingers. Really, the top fingers are just there for support, and you're opening up from the bottom, from the base or the ball of the foot. as you go through this, if you feel any crunchiness, spend extra time there. So again, I can really feel crunchiness around where these calluses of hers are because she's walking a little bit protectively here. And so wherever there is calluses is an indication that that's where the pressure of their body is rolling into. So you can loosen that up and that can help their feet feel a lot fluffier, a lot less tense. All right, so we've opened up the ball of the foot nicely. We'll come back now and start rotating. You can see we've got bigger rotations happening. As things loosen up, things start to give. It's fascinating to work with somebody. I've worked with this guest for years, and if I don't see her for a while, what we notice is there's no range of motion. And sometimes I can get it to open up just by stretching, and then sometimes it's just too tender and I really got to go back and forth. So it's still quite tender right now, even though we are seeing each other. But the range of motion, you can see that's opened up. So we'll loosen up the ankle. And rotate it, and a little bit of dorsiflexion. And again, for me, it's easier to lean in. It's an awkward visual for you, but whatever. The idea's there. All right, we can also loosen up the calf muscle to loosen up the ankle. So if the Achilles tendon connects to the calf, if I loosen up the calf, I might be able to loosen up the ankle. Knowing that she's using a deviation to walk with, her calf will be tender as well. And it's very strong. She's got a very strong calf. So we'll be gentle and just come through with kneading technique. You can knead with your thumb, or now I'm doing pincer grasps. And a little bit of S-bowing and C-bowing. And she's quite tender in there. So maybe we'll use our palms and soothe that out. And then come back to this tendon and see how we're doing. It did give quite a lot before, so I'm just going to peg it one more time. It's not her favorite, so I'll go lighter. Whenever you do things that aren't somebody's favorite, mix it up with things that are their favorite so that they don't go into a protective mode. It's even when somebody trusts you, it's so essential that you pay attention to their cues so that you can make modifications right away. So if I was to pick on the areas that I know need the work and I just stayed there, I would light her up and she would be so, her nerves would be lit up, so she'd have a lot of pain afterwards. And maybe the next day she would be fine, but is it worth it to not be able to walk for a day? So play with your techniques and then do some yummy stuff in between that's soothing and feels good. Even move on to the next foot and then come back, or work on the heels or the balls or the arch of the foot. Leave things alone for 5 or 10 minutes sometimes and then go back to it and revisit it again. That'll allow you time to have their body process what happened, have a histamine reaction, come out, and then you can get in there and do more work because they have these great anti-inflammatories that are coming in and are saying, hey, something's needing a bit of support here. I'm just squeezing in between the toes now because that feels lovely. And it also helps to relax the toes, just squeezing in between them. A place that's not touched very much. And I'll go into my regular plantar fasciitis work now, where I can work the arch of the foot and work the heel of the foot, and then I'll come back and do that again. I just wanted to show you guys a little bit of specialized work for ankle plates and working with the malleoli. Again, highlights of today was lots of traction and holding the traction without digging your fingers in, especially into the scars. We did scar tissue stripping where we pulled away from the scar. And then we did skin rolling where we released the adhesions by stripping it. And we did a little bit of heat, welcoming our guides and healing light from source to come through and bless them with the healing and some comfort. And we did lots of dorsiflexion, extension. We worked on the hammer toes by securing the base of the tendon and then offering length and holding. We did joint play in between the metatarsals, and that loosens up, and we looked for where the calluses were and really tried to open up the foot. And we've talked about proper foot care and about dorsiflexion at home and that home stretch, that if you do that for 2 minutes a day can really help to open up your range of motion. And certainly with the ankle, it's walking that can be beneficial, although when it's really sore and swollen, walking will have bone going on bone and it'll be too painful to do. So when it gets really swollen, the best thing to do, if you don't have a hot tub, is hop into a bath with 2 cups of salt and do your dorsiflexion in the tub. That buoyancy will allow you to increase your range of motion. You can also do that with cycling, as there's no weight on the foot when you're cycling. So if we have stationary bikes, we're in Canada, so in the winter we might use a stationary bike, and in the summer get on a pedal bike. Well, thanks for tuning in, and if you have any questions, love to hear from you. Happy to answer them. Take care and be well.